Hello everyone, I'm Lauren Cook and I will be presenting Effects of Volunteering on the Well-Being of Older Adults by Nancy Moreau Howell, Jim Hinterlong, Philip A. Rosario, and Feng Yan Tang from the Journal of Gerontology from 2003. The author started out the article by paying homage to the people who have come before them that had been studying the effect of volunteering on well-being, which had been studied for more than 3 decades. And when they formulated their hypotheses for this study and article, they looked at what people before them, scientists before them, had published, and they formulated the hypothesis to, see if they could prove or disprove those previous findings. So the first hypothesis that they wanted to study was whether those who volunteer have higher levels of well-being. Second, if they were looking at whether there was a positive relationship between the number of hours and well-being with a ceiling before the effects leveled off. Third, they believed there was going to be a stronger relationship between volunteering and elders with lower social integration. 4, no moderating effects would be found from race, age, or gender. 5th, that volunteering for more than one organization will be associated with better outcomes, which plays into the role theory of volunteering, which states that the more roles people play, that's why they have more roles, so they are more fulfilled. So that was their trying to test there. 6th, that volunteering for religious organizations will have the largest effect compared to other types of organizations. And lastly, they wanted to, which is their own hypotheses, hadn't been proved by anybody before, was that perceived benefit of work would have a positive relationship to well-being, meaning that people who thought the work they were doing was important and benefiting the people they were serving would actually have a more positive relationship with well-being than those who did not. To test their hypotheses, the authors created a study based on the American Changing Lives database, which was a longitudinal study done in 1986, 1989, and 1994 for people all over the United States. The authors used a subset of people who were 60 plus at wave 1, which was 1,669 people. The information for the database was gathered through face-to-face interviews, and then the authors of this article actually used multiple random imputation for missing data. So they filled in the missing information for people who at wave 2 or 3 were not dead, but they couldn't get in contact with, by creating 5 different models and kind of filling in the information based on these 5 different models. And they used 5 models so that they didn't put their own spin on the data. They tried to get as close to what the data should have been had they been able to interview those people, but they couldn't. So in a face-to-face interview, they asked questions to try to prove or disprove their hypotheses. So they asked how old people were, how many times a week they talked to their friends to prove social integration. They asked where people volunteered, what type of organization it was, how often they volunteered, how many hours they volunteered. They asked a lot of those kind of questions to get that background information, and then to figure out, to test the well-being of people. They actually used 3 different variables, which were self-rated health, which they asked the person on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel, and people, answered how they personally felt about themselves. Then they tested also functional dependency. So it was a 6 different functional items. So I would think, most of the ADLs, like, how can you bathe yourself, how you're walking, and those kind of things. And people ranked 1 to 4 for each of those 6 independence variables for functional dependency to test to see how they were all doing, how the well-being was based on functional dependency. And finally, they used a 11 symptom scale rating 1 to 3 on frequency for depression, or depressive symptomology. They took all that data and they did their math and their statistics, and they kind of went through whether or not they proved or disproved their hypotheses. So I feel like it's the best way to kind of look at what the total article was about by comparing their hypotheses with the data they got. So first and foremost, they felt that the data supported that those people who volunteer have higher levels of well-being. In fact, they even said that there was a significant effect of volunteering on well-being. They also felt the data proved that there was a positive relationship between the number of hours and well-being, with a ceiling before the effects levels off of 100 hours a year. And that actually ties in with another study that was done that they cite in the beginning of the article, with the 100 hours and everything. So they did prove that hypothesis. Third, they actually found there was no evidence that people who had lower social integration got more benefit from volunteering, which kind of just goes to disprove the idea that the reason why volunteering is good for well-being is because you interact with people, and otherwise people who don't interact don't have well-being. It's not that it's fulfilling a social need in that way for integration. There's some other effect that's creating the well-being from volunteering. Fourth, they kind of proved and disproved their hypotheses. There was no effect for race or gender, but there was evidence that age moderates the relationship between volunteering and well-being. What they found was that, I'm citing the article itself, so specifically the association between age and functional dependency, where the coefficient indicates that age goes up, functional dependency goes up, is weaker for volunteers. So basically the people who volunteered were doing better over time, even as they aged, which I found to be really interesting as well. Fifth, there was no evidence that volunteering for more than one organization was associated with better outcomes. Going to disprove or support that the role theory does not work, that it doesn't matter how many roles of volunteer roles you have, that's not what creates the significant effect of well-being for volunteering. They also had very minimal support for the idea that religious organizations created the most effect of well-being when you volunteered for them. And lastly, there was no perceived benefit of work that affected the relationship with well-being. So it didn't matter if you thought what you're doing was the most important thing and you were helping people in amazing ways. It didn't affect whether or not it didn't affect your well-being over the 8-year study. So there were some real positives to the study that helped support the validity of the findings. The study was done over an 8-year period. It was a pretty large sampling of people. The people who actually followed through all 3 ways was more than 900 people. And they were nationally represented, so it's not just a pocket of people in one part of the country that are affected by volunteering, which helps to think that maybe it's not just one cultural section of the United States that's affected by volunteering. And then also the fact that they tested multiple well-being indicators really helps validate the findings, and that volunteering affected all 3 of those well-being factors, that people who volunteered did better in not just their own perceived well-being, but also in their functional dependency and in their depression scales. So I thought that really helped support their finding that volunteering helped older adults well-being over time. So there were concerns in the article. One concern was brought up by the authors themselves, which is social causation versus social selection. And basically people are doing better, so they choose to volunteer, and so they're going to always do better because they were at a better place to begin with. However, the authors cite another group of authors who actually did a study who proved that social causation and social selection actually walk hand in hand when it comes to volunteering. And they state that well-being facilitates volunteer involvement, and that volunteer involvement subsequently augments well-being. So they kind of talk you through why that's not actually the case here, that really there is some effect of volunteering on well-being independent of how people were before they started the study. However, I still have concerns about the fact that they filled in missing data, that they I think that anytime you're not using true data, and even with all the models they were doing, it just seems still like it has a possibility of changing the numbers. And I'll be honest, I'm an accountant. I like numbers that have passed. That's kind of what we do, and I don't like economics for that exact reason, because I don't understand looking at things in the future in that way. But I just think that had they just stuck with the 900 people, they still would have had a pretty strong statement that they could have made, and there wouldn't have been any possibility of it being the data being manipulated through their own models. However, they used 5 models, which I think helps moderate the issue. But I think I would have preferred had they just stuck with the 900 people. So then, what do we take away from what the authors want us to take away from the study? Well, they think that there needs to be programs and policies that promote volunteering in older adults. That it's a public health issue, and that when seniors know that, or older adults know that they can really benefit not only the community but themselves when they volunteer, that more people will volunteer, and therefore more people will get the effects of volunteering on their well-being. I do want to say that when I was researching this, was looking at this article, I did find the Senior Court, which is a part of AmeriCorps, and I think it's a pretty amazing program that's promoting seniors volunteering in a wide variety of ways that are really affecting their communities, but they even talk about it affecting the people themselves. And then the authors also stated that this is just the tip of the iceberg. We still need to figure out what the causal relationship is to volunteering and well-being, but that to do that, the next step would be to isolate out the effect of individual choice and preferences. They admit it's going to be hard to do that, but that really to move forward, that's the next step in research on well-being and the effects that volunteering has on it. So I want to end with 3 kind of review questions. So what are the variables that the study captured to test well-being? A, self-rated health, functional dependency, and depressive symptomology. B, self-rated health and functional dependency. Or C, self-rated health, depressive symptomology, and positivity. And the answer is A. Number 2, do race, age, and/or gender have a moderating effect? Yeah, A, yes, they all do. B, only age. C, gender and race. Or D, no, none of them moderated the effect. And as I discussed, it was only age that affected it, so it doesn't matter your race or your gender. It's good to volunteer, and their well-being will be affected no matter what your race or age. And third, did the study find that there was a positive relationship between the number of hours served? And if so, did they find there was a ceiling before the effects leveled off? A, yes, but no ceiling. B, yes, with a 100-hour-a-year ceiling. Or C, no. And the answer is B, yes, with a 100-hour-a-year ceiling, which I think is pretty interesting, because that's only a couple hours a week, and I think anybody can do that, and we can all get the benefits of our well-being from volunteering. And I leave you with a quote from the article that the authors cited Butler. It said, "We should transform retirement by work-life extensions and by expanding volunteer roles for the benefit of society and as well as the individual." Kind of the emphasis of this article. It's good for society and it's good for the individual. Thank you.